at the quarterback position. Oh my gosh, have we found it? Have we found the biggest buy in fantasy football? We might have.
Right here. Top draft values, or at least name values, at the QB and tight end position. And we're going to do a little buy or sell with these guys. Let's start with the quarterbacks, Johnny, and start with a guy very near and dear to my heart, Aaron Rodgers, number 12 of the Green Bay Packers. Discount double check himself is sitting here. This is a guy like just a couple years ago that was a consistent top 2 quarterback, not top 5, not top 10. Like he was either 1 or 2 in fantasy football for a good stretch of years.
Listen, we had to do the discount double check when we saw the ADP of Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, but his ADP has him sitting in the 9th round, and it just, first of all, it's really making me feel that 30.6 age. But I feel a little old when I see Aaron Rodgers dipping in ADP. But Johnny, are you buying or selling this ADP for Aaron Rodgers in the 9th round?
So like you, I was very surprised that because just last year we were talking about Aaron Rodgers as, hey, is he bounce back year? All this stuff. He was going as the 2 or 3 quarterback, 2nd or 3rd quarterback off the board last year. And I look at his numbers. I looked at where he finished last year, and it wasn't pretty, Travis. And this is for Whisper Nation. This is just a little side note. When we jumped into these show notes and we threw up Aaron Rodgers, we said, "Oh wow, this is a value, Aaron Rodgers." And I told Travis with a heavy heart, I said, "Travis, I apologize if I find anything terrible with Aaron Rodgers. This might not go the way that you want it to go." And he assured me that he was okay. So I'm about to let it loose a little bit here. Hopefully Big Travy does not leave the show after this conversation here about Aaron Rodgers. Listen, I have no problem with Aaron Rodgers from a quarterback standpoint. He is still super, super, super good. Like 26 touchdowns, over 4,000 passing yards. Number 1 in money throws, Travis, with 34. 34 money throws, Travis. It's
the best
spot on. The best thrower
in the NFL.
So with that, everyone's like, well, why would your confidence go down, and why wouldn't you be grabbing Aaron Rodgers in the 9th round? Well, I'll tell you why. You look at the starting schedule: Vikings, Lions, Saints, Falcons. Not bad. I don't mind that at all. So I think that he could get off to a nice little start. But the big problem, Travis, 2 years ago, he only had 4 games where he had less than 250 passing yards. Last year, he only had 4 games in which he had over 250 passing yards. The passing yards have gone away completely. The talent is still there. Aaron Rodgers can still do it. And now you can argue the chip on your shoulder. I would accept that argument that Aaron Rodgers is going to come in with the chip on his shoulder. But I'm sorry, that's such a huge concern for me. Boomer bust. You're talking about a huge boomer bust candidate here. He only had 4 games in the top 4 last season. Everything else was like bottom 20 at the quarterback position. So unfortunately for me, I would probably have to pass on Aaron Rodgers because I don't know if I believe in the chip on his shoulder so much so that will bring up the yardage. He has to get the yardage up for me to have confidence. And I didn't see it. 4 games, Travis, of over 250.
Yeah, and look, career-wise, he's never been a big yardage guy. But what he has been is he's thrown a lot of touchdowns and he's thrown very minimal interceptions. They have had very different offense last year than that they've had in the last 10 years, meaning that it was, we had a very strong defense. We being the Green Bay Packers had a very strong defense last year that got after the quarterback really well. And so Aaron Rodgers was not forced to be the guy that he had to be in years past. And I think, based on how they drafted or didn't draft wide receivers, based on how they drafted, A.J. Dillon. I don't know if you've seen a picture of A.J. Dillon.
Oh, that dude's a beast.
Yoked.
Yeah.
And so that's at the running back position to complement Aaron Jones. I think we're watching, Matt LaFleur turn this into a Shanahan 3.0, 2.0 kind of thing here, where they will pound the rock and play to a strong defense, or at least that's what they want to do. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of validity in what Johnny's saying here as far as the yardage going down. But I will say this is the second year of that offense which means some of those younger wide receivers will have a chance to step forward. They drafted a tight end this year and last year, which means multiple tight ends they're going to be running.
Sternberger, love that guy.
Jay Sternberger is a good weapon. I think there's a lot of people that people don't really know about because it is Green Bay. They draft and develop. But I would not be surprised if Aaron Rodgers' touchdown numbers go up. The yardage could stay about the same. I mean, last year he had 4,002 yards. It was a dip from the year before. Yes, about 400 yards different. So I think the yardage could go up. He's definitely hovered around the 4,300 yard range with, about 3 or 4 more touchdowns. 5 or 6 more touchdowns. So I think Aaron Rodgers actually is still a value at 9-10. Like he's going around before Matt Stafford. I know that's the guy we're going to talk about next, and he's got a lot to offer here. So you could wait around and go with Stafford, but I'm not. Look, if you want to play, you stacked 8 rounds of position guys, and then you want to take Aaron Rodgers in the 9th. I think that's a good bet. If he goes up any higher, yeah, I could see that, but I like that. I like the upside there.
I think that. If you
he finished his QB9 last year, and that was the first year of Matt LaFleur's offense. So just to put it in perspective, Aaron Rodgers had been playing in one offense his entire career, and then switched to a new offense last year with not just a new head coach, a rookie head coach, his first time calling plays.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other point to be made here is that Aaron Rodgers is now in year 2 of that scheme, and I think he's a good shot to increase his play. And you're going to get him at a value if he increases it significantly or even just a little bit.
I do think that with a lot of these quarterbacks that we are going to talk on this show, and I think that this year over more years significantly, there are good quarterbacks, later in drafts, late round quarterbacks. But I'm more on the strategy this year than ever that if you take one of those late round quarterbacks, it's not with the understanding that, hey, this guy could be my season-long starter. I mean, we'll talk about a couple of these guys that I actually do think that could end up being season-long starters, but the majority of these late-round quarterbacks are going to be week-to-week streamers, which is going to be fine. We'll get you through that, Whisper Nation. Don't be worried. We'll give you week-to-week streamers. But I think that that's where this position is going because what we saw last year was a lot of the fantasy community started to notice that these quarterbacks with rushing upsides, we generally want to take higher because they have a higher floor. And for the first year, we are actually seeing that adjustment where there's not very many rushing quarterbacks in the later rounds like there have been to swing for those fences, the Lamar Jacksons, the Patrick Mahomes of previous years. So these guys are going to be guys that have upside, but they're not going to be as much upside as years past is what I'm finding as well.
Yeah, that's a fair point. So moving on to Matthew Stafford, he's going off the board as QB 13. His ADP is in the 10th round at 10:01, just barely in the 10th round here, just going a couple slots ahead or behind of Aaron Rodgers. So Johnny, we got into how good Matt Stafford was for the 8 games at the top of the show a little bit with Kenny G, but give me a little bit of Matt Stafford, and at that ADP, are you buying or selling the value here of Matthew Stafford?
Matthew Stafford, to my disbelief, was on pace last year, Travis, for 5,000 passing yards. So this is what he did in 8 games, so half the season, threw for 2,500 passing yards, 19 passing touchdowns, and he had 55 deep ball passes. We talked about Kenny G having 37 of those deep or 36 of those deep ball targets, and he was averaging 20.8 fantasy points per game. That ranked number 4 in the league. I just talked about I didn't think a lot of these quarterbacks could be season-long starters. I think Matthew Stafford could be a season-long starter for you. I think that he's one of the best values. I'm definitely buying this 100%. He's currently quarterback 13, Travis. But everything is showing. I mean, getting Marvin Jones back. 5 out of 8 games last year, he was QB 6 or better. His adjusted yards per attempt, 8.6. All of these are healthy signs and showing me that he's not going to regress. It will be his second year in this system. We already had seen in the small sample size that he was able to be successful in that system. So for me, I'm not, I didn't dive too much into, I should probably look up the schedule for the Detroit Lions. Well, I know that they play the Green Bay Packers in week 2, so I do know that. But I'm not sure who their week 1 opponent. I'm not sure who their week 1 opponent is. But for me, I mean, Matthew Stafford, we've always seen he's like he loves to sling the rock. And
yeah, so I think the biggest thing, we knew he loved to sling the rock. We knew he was a great deep ball thrower, but he had always kind of masked that with a bunch of bad decisions or, interceptions down the field because he loved to force it too much. But last year, Johnny, as that Ian Hartitz article we had mentioned before on Roto World, Ian points out that, under OC Darrell Bevell, Matt Stafford had the highest following of his career. Touchdown rate at 6.5%, yards per attempt at 8.6 yards, adjusted yards per attempt at 9.1, yards per completion at 13.4, and QBR at 73.1. He was highly efficient in this new system. He really liked what Bevell brought to the table after a couple years of being consistent with Jim Bob Cooter as well and being efficient.
That was your number 1 offensive coordinator. Travis loved him.
He was great. He was just a fun name.
Hey, we played this song for him.
Jim Bob?
Yeah. We played this song for him when he left on the show. Hey. Sorry. I had to we know it was I'm sorry.
You can't help yourself.
This is just a sensitive show, Travis. I'm sorry. It's a sensitive show for you.
I just think that Matt Stafford's, being discounted as the guy he always used to be. And in 8 games last year, he proved he was really humming in this offense. You extrapolate that on the season, he would have been really good, as Johnny was mentioning before.
And people are not going to remember that. People are not going to remember that.
I would say out of the guys that we're talking about today, Matt Stafford is probably my favorite as far as value versus upside. Do I think that Aaron Rodgers can get to the upside I was talking about? Yes, of course. I'm a Packers fan. I would love to believe that. Stafford actually has, I think, the better path, just based on weapons, too. Stafford has a plethora of weapons. We talked about Matthew. We've talked about Marvin Jones. We've talked about Kenny Galladay, but TJ Hawkinson's another one that, people are kind of sleeping on. We'll get into him.
Yeah, so we might as well have. We should have. I just realizing this. We should have just named this the Detroit Lions outlook here.
No joke. But yeah, I wouldn't hesitate grabbing Stafford, especially in the 10th round if it hovers around that ADP.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so moving on to a couple guys that are Ben Roethlisberger is our next quarterback. He's coming out at QB 17. He's in the 11th round, 11.10. And I think what's built into a lot of his hesitancy to be drafted here is that elbow. I mean, he had a Tommy John-like injury to the elbow, had surgery on that. And so now he's back. He's throwing the football. His beard's trimmed. He's looking good. But is he worth the stab here at QB 17? Is he a guy, if you're completely punting the position and picking up a guy and your plan is maybe to stream the position, Johnny, are you okay with starting the year with Ben Roethlisberger?
So when going through Ben Roethlisberger's entire outlook, this is a true story. I'm going through Ben Roethlisberger's outlook and, I see QB 17. I see ADP 11-10. I'm like, check. 2 things I already like about Ben Roethlisberger, and my whole strategy that I like to partake in, right? Look up some stories. Juju's over here. I mean, have you ever heard Juju lie? Me neither. Juju's over here saying, Ben Roethlisberger, you can hear a little zip on the ball when he throws it to you. He's saying he's looking good. You have him working out with, I forgot the slot name or the
Barry Switzer.
Yeah, thank you. Saying the same thing. Oh, Ben Roethlisberger's back. So I'm like really getting excited. Like my heart's starting to race a little bit. I'm like, ooh, I might have found my late round gem here. Then I'm like looking even further. 2018. You remember this year, Travis, with Big Ben finished as the number 3 quarterback in fantasy. Over 400 fantasy points, which is like if you're getting 400 from your quarterback, hey. So, oh my gosh, my heart's racing a little bit more. I'm about to text Big Travy. Get deeper into the research. 5 out of 6 years, Travis, is unbelievable. 5 out of the last 6 years, he's finished with over 300 fantasy points at the quarterback position. Oh my gosh, have we found it? Have we found the biggest buy in fantasy football? We might have. And yet that came to a crashing halt when I looked at what over 300 fantasy points get you last year for a quarterback position. I was like, I found it. I've got my guy. I'm going to text Big Travy. We got it. We were going to let Whisper Nation know. And then I look it up, and it's just QB 12 on the year if you put him at 306 fantasy points, or 316 fantasy points, which is what he had 2 or 3 years ago, an average of 3 years ago, right? So it's like, after all, you look at all the pieces and you go through the story, you realize his ADP is basically where it should be. Now, like I said, be confident that, hey, at least I'm going to get a very, very solid quarterback who has the upside to be a quarterback 3, because we saw it just 2 years ago. Don't be scared off by the Tommy John surgery. Most players come back better from that surgery. That's what you hear often from pitchers. So I'm not worried about that at all. But it was just a roller coaster of emotions researching Big Ben. But Travis, I would ultimately say he's a buy for me, because I do think that the upside's there. I do see the same amount of upside that he had a few years ago.
Yeah, I think the QB 17. First of all, like, your research sounds like it's super emotional. Sounds like you were just really like. Dude, I feel like you could go to therapy on just how hard you research.
Well, really want a time lapse of that process for him. Just Johnny like crying and screaming and celebrating, and then like.
Ooh, that's a great content idea. All right, I'm on it. I'm working on it. Yeah,
and Mr. Hyde like trying to figure out who he likes here.
Well, because here's the thing. One, I want to help Whisper Nation out, so I'm like, did I just find treasure that nobody's talking about? And two, I have to outsmart all of you guys, because you all of our friends listen to our show. We're grateful for that, but they do. And so I have to be better about my research and how I go about it.
I love a good growth story. I will just say this about Ben. I think QB 17 is a little too low. I think we're seeing the elbow injury kind of built into that. I think he's definitely, a top 15 guy that can sneak within the top 10 very easily based on what the stats Johnny was spewing out about his career. There is one thing, though, about these last 5 to 6 years prior to the injury. There is one glaring hole that's in that offense, and that's Antonio Brown does not exist on the Pittsburgh Steelers anymore. Now, you can say Juju Smith-Schuster's there, but
and Deontay Johnson, you've got Deontay Johnson.
Do you have enough faith in the supporting cast to believe that they can get back to a top 5 offense? Because that's what it took for Big Ben to get there. So really, the drafting of Big Ben is if you believe in the Steelers to have a major bounce back offensively this year based on the weapons. I don't know that if I believe it can get to the AB Juju level, but it's very interesting to take a chance on a guy like Ben Roethlisberger if you just keep collecting nuggets in the rounds before and you want to keep waiting on QB. I have no problem with that. We have seen that you can consistently stream the quarterback position and wind up around QB 6, 7, or 8, somewhere in that range. If you do it correctly, you pick your spots. So Ben Roethlisberger, I mean, he's very cheap right now in the 11th round, and you can stack your team in a lot of different ways for, like Johnny said, a team or a quarterback position that is pretty deep.
Hey, and what did we just say? This was your exact quote on the last show. What do we know is certain to be true in life? Death, taxes, and that the Pittsburgh Steelers draft a good wide receiver. So I'm not worried about that part of it.
Yeah, I would say, drafting AB versus drafting someone else is a little different, but yes, I would. I mean, I know people tend to forget how good AB was because of how crazy he's become, but I believe that there's definitely some upside in that Pittsburgh offense with a healthy Big Ben. We're going to see it across the board with Juju, Deontay Johnson, James Conner. We're going to see it across the board if Ben stays healthy the whole year. All right, so moving on to our last quarterback that is a name value going late in rounds, but we need to talk about here if we're buying or selling the ADP of 13.01 for Kirk Cousins as the QB 20 off the board. Johnny, your boy, you like that?
Like that?
You like Kirk Cousins right there?
Oh, if you like the speaking of, if you like that, if you liked my reaction and my emotional roller coaster with Ben Roethlisberger, Kirk Cousins was a bit uglier. It wasn't as much of an up and down. It was just more of a down with a little speed bump at the end as far as my level of excitement for Kirk Cousins. Finished as a QB 14 last year. Nothing. I mean, there was a stretch in the middle of the season where he was a top 10 quarterback for fantasy. And that's again where I bring in the stats about, hey, Kirk Cousins might be more of a weekly flex guy, a guy that you can throw in depending on their matchups, because last year he only scored 16.2 fantasy points per game, which was good for 16th. Not exciting there. The very first 6 games on their slate, Travis: Packers, Colts, Titans, Texans, Seahawks, Falcons. Now, I don't know about you, but not a lot of those seemed like real barn burners. Maybe the Colts could get up there. The Texans, that should be a pretty big score. The only other confidence I would have, so Kirk Cousins, he'd passed for 26 passing touchdowns last year and 3,600 yards. Gets Gary Kubiak in, and we do know that Gary Kubiak runs a very efficient offense. His quarterbacks aren't elite quarterbacks, certainly, but back in 2014, the last time he was an offensive coordinator, specifically not a head coach, just an offensive coordinator, Mr. Elite himself, Joe Flacco, threw for 316.44 fantasy points, which was ironically this exact same as Ben Roethlisberger that we were talking about just a second ago. And so, I just said that was good enough for QB 12. The Vikings could be in some situations on where they're trailing from behind, and Kirk Cousins he's definitely a good quarterback as far as on the field, but I don't know if he's going to be that way for fantasy. So I would sell Kirk Cousins this year for fantasy. I would not be drafting him at that ADP.
I was looking back, kind of while you were going there, looking back at some of the
photograph. Because every time I do, it makes you laugh.
No. Oh, man. Just want to get away from Nickelback on the show at all costs. Our subscriber count just went down by 15, I think.
Dude, people love Nickelback.
So Kirk Cousins, other than Peyton Manning, Kirk Cousins is probably going to be the best quarterback that Gary Kubiak has coached as far as talent-wise. And yes, I understand Joe Flacco won a Super Bowl and he had a hot offseason or a hot postseason that year that he did. But Joe Flacco is garbage. He's hot garbage. He's not elite. And
wow, you sound like someone that got burnt by.
No, I just think Joe Flacco is a joke. Okay. Anyways, Kirk Cousins is probably the most talented quarterback other than Peyton Manning, which was an aging Peyton Manning that Gary Kubiak has coached. We actually saw 2. I couldn't believe this. I did a double take here. We saw 2 years where Matt Schaub was a top 10 fantasy quarterback under Gary Kubiak's system. So there is some hope here for Kirk Cousins. I just feel like we saw too many times last year where this team was so committed under Zimmer to just run the football and play to the defense, and it didn't matter. You're going to get games where Kirk Cousins throws for 30 times and it has a decent top 10 week, but then you're going to get games where this team throws for 15 times, and it's just not enough volume. You watch Stephon Diggs go away, so a lot of that pop goes out of this offense. I love Justin Jefferson, think he'll be a great play, but I can't bank that he's going to be a great play enough this year to make Kirk Cousins worth it. I would rather take a chance at a Ben Roethlisberger here and then I would at a Kirk Cousins.
And
I think there's way.
And the games that you were talking about, Travis, where Kirk Cousins did throw, they were obvious games. Like his if you were playing the streaming game, you would have made a good bet that Kirk Cousins was going to have a good game just because of the matchup. So that's why I think that you're better off with Kirk Cousins just as a streamer. Would you agree with that?
100%.
Yeah,
100%. So moving on to the tight end portion of the show, Johnny, we're going to talk here.
Love the tight end position.
Value tight ends. We're going to do a little buy and sell on these guys. We're going to start with one of Johnny's favorites this year, a guy that he's actually kind of turned my head to, and that's Hayden Hurst of the Atlanta Falcons. He's going off as the 10th tight end off the board in the 7th round. He's kind of creeping up. If you've watched his ADP over the last couple of weeks, obviously because people are listening to the Fantasy Whispers, listening to Big Travy talk about Hayden Hurst.
Take him in every mock draft that we have.
So let's talk a little bit about Hayden Hurst, Johnny. Are you buying or selling Hayden Hurst as the 10th tight end off the board?
I was a hardcore buy on Hayden Hurst 2 months ago. And then I tell Big Travy about Hayden Hurst. And hey, and I will say I give him appreciation. He actually did admit it on the show just now. He gave me some shout outs. So I appreciate the love. And what's not to get excited about? I got the real OG right here on the wall, Austin Hooper, who Hayden Hurst will be replacing in this offense. And I understand we get excited, and there's a lot to go off of because Austin Hooper was a top 5 tight end last year. Austin Hooper went in the double-digit rounds for drafts, and so it's aligning up very, very similar. But the difference is that now we have a proven commodity, right? We know that we have vacated targets now in Atlanta, and we know that it was the tight end position, and they get a athletic guy like Hayden Hurst, who Matt Ryan has already come out and said is the most athletic tight end he's ever played with, which is kind of mind-boggling.
He played with Tony Gonzalez?
Yeah, like he played with Tony Gonzalez. He played with Austin Hooper, who we know is like really and just got like the highest contract for a tight end. And he's actually never been on an actual football field, I don't believe, and played with Hayden Hurst, unless there's something I'm missing about in college or something.
Yeah,
so
gassing him up, yeah, big time.
So maybe Matt Ryan had him on his fantasy team and is trying to, maybe trade him. Maybe he's trying to gas him up to trade him. I don't know. But I will say someone brought up a great point. Or it was Austin actually on Monday's show, so I want to thank him for it, because it is starting for me to get to a point, Travis, where Hayden Hurst is no longer the value that he used to be. He used to be, the 15th tight end off the board, but now he's catching on. He's already moved up 5 spots from early season to middle of this offseason. And I just think that that's going to continue to climb. And unfortunately, I think he's going to become like Hunter Henry was last year, where players are going to start taking him in the 7th round and you're kind of drafting him at his max value. So I already think I think this would be the absolute max I would pay for him. It would be tight end 10 coming off the board. I wouldn't go any higher because then you're risking, messing up the pick.
I would tend to agree with you that if he gets higher than this point, but I still think he is a value, and I still think you need to be looking at him at this point. There are guys that are going behind him that I just don't feel as comfortable on as a role in that.
Well, I'm going to change your mind. I'm going to change your mind in the show, Travis. So
it's really about Atlanta as an offense and how consistently they have been in pass attempts over the last 10 years, 8 years with Matt Ryan. They always throw the ball. They are going to continue to throw the football. I know they brought in Todd Gurley. I get that, but Todd Gurley is still a running back with an arthritic knee that I think that they are going to, continue to throw the football. So I don't mind what Johnny's saying here. I think it makes a lot of sense. Just continue to monitor Hayden Hurst ADP. If he gets any higher, it's going to be a lot more risky because he'll have to hit in order to return that value. So we're going to go to another guy that's a little of a oddball in the tight end group, but this position is one that's so volatile that we need to talk about these guys. Out of Miami, Mike Gesicki is going as tight end 12 in the 9th round, 902. So you might not realize this, but Mike Gesicki actually finished as the tight end number 7, the tight end number 7 last year. Was that correct? Yeah, now I got to check myself. No, tight end 11. Sorry, I knew that was.
I was like,
tight end. But you may not know that either, that he was starting tight end for the Miami Dolphins last year, because obviously Devontae Parker got a lot of love. Preston Williams had some great games, but Kiseki actually ended up being a guy that could go a lot further down the field than people thought. And so,
yeah.
So we'll just get into Mike Gesicki here for a second. Johnny, tell the people what they should know about Mike here.
So I'm about to brighten Big Travy's day up right now. Brighter than it's already been. You could tell the sun on his beautiful face there. He's been getting some. But I'm about to brighten it up even better, because he just said there's not many more people after Hayden Hurst that get him excited. So Whisper Nation and Chelsea, Women Behind the Glass, we need to change that perspective. We got to get you guys excited. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to be the hype man right now. Mike Geisiki, people are just they're not catching up yet. But after the show, they will. And Mike Geiseki's value is probably going to skyrocket after the show. Because you look at, they didn't bring anybody else in for the offensive weapons for Miami as far as the wide receivers and pass catchers. They brought in some running backs, brought an offensive line, brought in a quarterback in Tua, right? But Mike Gesicki last year he played 69.5% of the snaps. He had a very healthy, he had a very healthy 15% market share at the tight end position. Also very nice. If you're telling me my tight end is getting 15% of their team's market share, I'm happy. I'm in a happy boat. He only had 32 receptions, which was a little bit low, but he did have 59 targets, and I could definitely see that going up this year, Travis. All right, I want to really unveil why it's so exciting and why you should be so excited for Mike Gesicki, because last year he played 34.6% in the slot. I just talked about how they have not brought any more pass catchers in on this offense. So you're basically getting a wide receiver. Look at some of these big name wide receivers that we really like, and they're not even getting 34% in the slot. He had a very, very solid amount of yardage last year, 570 yards, 5 touchdowns. We know what rookie quarterbacks like to do when they come in. They like to target the tight end position. Fitzmagic, I believe, is going to start this season. I think if you look at their schedule, it is brutal. Like they're opening, they start off probably with the 2 hardest games. They go New England, and we know that New England had the number 1 defense last year in fantasy. I think it'll regress, but I digress. That's week 1, and then week 2 they play the Buffalo Bills, who I do think will have the best defense in the entire league. So back-to-back, very difficult weeks, 1 and 2 for Fitzmagic. But I think Mike Gesicki is going to be a tight end that I will be stashing on a ton of my teams because I think his upside is a top 5 tight end this year.
Dang, top 5. Well,
yeah.
I will say this. I think, what a lot of people don't realize is how good of a prospect Mike Gesicki is. All of his metrics, if you look at workout metrics based on playerprofile.com, are in the top 95th percentile. He has got a great 4.5 speed. His burst score is great. His agility is great. They comped him to Vernon Davis, who we know is a freak at the tight end position and spent a lot of good years getting down the field.
Can't coach him, coach.
Some of the efficiency metrics for Gesicki are in the top 5 or in the top 10. His contested catch rate is 33.3%. That's number 4 amongst tight ends. So that's something you like to see, especially no matter what happens.
Only had 2 drops.
Yeah, with Fitzmagic. And then if they go to Tua, which we know, if you go to a rookie quarterback, we have enough data to see that a rookie quarterback loves his tight end. But then if you're talking about contested catch rate being high up there too, which means he'll be forgiving for Tua. He could put it off the mark for Tua and get it caught for him. So yeah, I think Gesicki's interesting, especially as a guy who was a starter and he's coming off the board as the last tight end off the board. He definitely has a real big shot to improve this season. I will say, Preston Williams only played in 8 games last year, and in those 8 games was did pretty well. So if he plays a full season, you could see a target share dip there. Don't know if it'll be exactly from him, but that's something to keep an eye on if you believe in Preston Williams and his talent. But I want to talk about the guy next. This is the guy, I said maybe Hayden Hurst I'm most excited about. I may be changing my tune big time on TJ Hockenson, Johnny. TJ Hawkinson's the tight end 15 off the board. He's 10.02. This was the best prospect out of the draft for tight ends last season. He was probably the one that everybody was most excited about. He came in and had some good games, then got injured. And then obviously Matt Stafford went down. So TJ Hockenson, maybe there's some recency bias for people, Johnny. Are you buying or selling him at the 10th round ADP currently?
So that I do want to preface with Whisper Nation, if they're like, hey, these ADPs seem a little bit high for the tight end, for these later round tight ends. It's because these are tight end premium rankings. So normally TJ Hockenson is even going undrafted or sometimes in the 14th round. Or I'll tell you at the end of this entire episode what I like to do in drafts, Whisper Nation. But TJ Hawkinson, I digress. We'll get back to it. Listen, I was off of the boat. I love TJ Hawkinson as a prospect. You look at everything that he is on paper as a prospect, and you love it all. Like, you're a great blocker, good pass catcher. Contested catch rate was 36. I mean, you talked about 33% for Joseki. TJ Hawkinson was at 36%, 36.4. Very similar in targets and receptions for Joseki, or as Joseki. So rightfully, it would be like, if I'm high on Joseki, I'm going to be high on TJ Hawkinson. The other thing that I will say is, with TJ Hawkinson over Joseki, I'm more confident in Joseki or in TJ Hawkinson's offense. Like, I'm more confident in Matthew Stafford chucking the ball for 5,000 yards than I am for Tua and Fitzmagic being able to chuck for even 4,000 yards. So for TJ Hawkinson, if you're waiting and people are just grabbing up a lot of these tight ends, I like this guy. He's going to stay on the field. He's a good blocker. Big Travy just said it. And the other, what I say that I liked about Mike Joseki, about the slot, he played so much in the slot. Well, guess who else plays a lot in the slot? TJ Hawkinson, 32% of the time. And yeah, I understand that Detroit added a wide receiver in the draft, but we have condition. Wide receivers rookie wide receivers don't typically pop off right away. All this stuff. So you're looking at the third best option in that heavy pass off offense. Sign me up. I like TJ Hawkinson.
Yeah, I think Hawkinson's. I think he might be going later right now than he was going last year, which is kind of wild to me when we saw what he was able to do when he was on the field. And we saw that a lot of his production down the stretch could be directly attributed to the fact that Matt Stafford was not there. So I will just say this about TJ Hawkinson. Like Johnny said, the offense is one you can trust probably as much as any that we're going to talk about in today's show, based on the efficiency in the offense. And Hawkinson is a prospect you could trust. So I think we've seen historically inconsistent seasons out of rookies, rookie tight ends. We could see a very big sophomore season out of TJ Hawkinson here, and he's a great value at tight end 15. All right, so our final value at tight end position is Jonnu Smith. He's going off the board as tight end 17 in the 10th round, the end of the 10th in these tight end premium ADPs. So Johnny, Jonnu Smith has kind of had to buy his time. Obviously, we've had to wait for Delaney Walker to do his thing, but you believe that Jonnu Smith time is now, don't you? You believe that you're buying into Jonnu Smith. He's one of your favorite late round guys when we mock draft. Why is Whisper Nation needing to pay attention to Jonnu Smith here?
Because they want to win their league. That's why. Last year, we gave you Mark Andrews, friend of the show. We told you to draft him, and what did he do? He popped off. He was a great tight end for you. 2 years ago, we were talking about George Kittle. We didn't think that he could do what he did, but we certainly were talking about George Kittle, and the list can go on. Like, I feel so confident in picking out tight ends, which is why I never go with the early round tight end options. Because I feel so confident in grabbing my tight ends. I feel good in how I evaluate the tight end position. And so I love waiting and kicking. I told Whisper Nation I was going to hold a secret for him till later. My whole secret with the tight end position, especially in this draft, is I will punt the position. I will let other people draft their tight ends, especially in the middle rounds. Go ahead and take those guys. And I'm going to grab a couple of these guys that we talked about today at the end of my draft. I'm going to stash 2 of them and give myself 2 dart throws because I feel confident that one, if not all of these guys on this list are going to pop off. I would guarantee that 2 of these guys are going to finish as top 8 tight ends. That's how confident I am, Whisper Nation. But Jonnu Smith will head that entire thing. That's why I'm happy when Travis takes Hayden Hurst in mock drafts. I'm like okay with it because he can no longer Well, he can, and now he probably will because I'm talking about it on the show. But Jonnu Smith is so incredibly undervalued right now, and fantasy community has not come around to it yet, but I'm sure they will because I'm now talking about it. No more Delaney Walker. He's gone. He finally took my advice and continued with his Walker right out the door and staying that way in retirement. Thank goodness. Jeez. Now Jonnu Smith gets a full opportunity. He already played on 74% of last year's snaps. I expect that to go up. Not as much in the slot. He didn't play as much in the slot, only 17%, but that's okay because he had 45 targets last season, 35 receptions for 439 yards and 3 touchdowns, which I think can all go up. I think it's easy that he gets into the 600 yard reception area. I think his touchdowns, he's a big guy, big tight end that I believe he used to play basketball. I'm pretty positive on that. Anyway, he's going to be a guy his touchdowns are going to get up. And look, we all know that Ryan Tannehill likes to throw to the tight end position. He's done it several years in his career. And I'll top it off. This is where it ends. First 3 games, Broncos, Jags, Vikings, Steelers. The only one
hoping you said the Cardinals in there somewhere. Then
I would, and that's something I want to. I mean, great point you brought up. Cardinals will not be last. Do not fall for that anymore because we just drafted Simmons, who is the best linebacker to keep up with the tight end. So Cardinals will not be the worst team against the tight end this year. You can put that in notes. I guarantee that. But none of these, I mean, Broncos, you're not afraid of that defense for for your tight end. Jags, nope. Vikings, maybe that would be the first concern, but you're week 3, you're already getting a good sample size and seeing whether Jonnu Smith is going to be a good tight end. And it's free. It's a free stab. I'm telling you, Jonnu Smith is going to be.
Yeah, the ADP is fantastic. He is a great prospect. He's been compared to David Njoku as far as athletics. And I would like to just bring up the fact that sometimes with tight ends, they take 2 to 3 years to develop. Yep. This is Jonnu Smith's 3rd year. He is now going to have all the opportunity to be the guy. So, yes, just based on pure opportunity and talent, he looks intriguing. Then you talk about the offense. This is a pound him offense. It's going to move the ball down the field, move the chains. And Jonnu Smith has every shot to be the number 2 receiving option behind A.J. Brown in this offense. We've seen it before with Ryan Tannehill, as Johnny was saying. So I think Jonnu Smith's worth it, especially he's the last guy we're talking about today. People are not even drafting him in some instances. And I think that's depending on your league. And so I think that's what makes him a huge value here. And I wouldn't be surprised, as Johnny was saying. I think, Johnny, you did a pretty good job convincing me on Joseki and Jonnu Smith here. So I appreciate the research.
Yeah.
Whisper Nation, we want to know what you think. Who are your quarterback tight end values, guys that are not really going in the early rounds that you want to talk about, you want to take a stab at? Let us know in the comments below or hit us up on social media in our DMs. We would appreciate it. For Chelsea Lee Byers, Johnny Game Time Hicks, I am Big Travy, and we are the Fantasy Whisperers. We're out.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Whisperers podcast. You can hear more from John and Travis on Google Play, SoundCloud, and iTunes. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at TF Whisperers.